You made me think, Rich, about where I was on 9/11, and it was a Tuesday morning. And on Tuesday mornings, we have a weekly staff meeting of the management staff of the police department, and it's at 10 after 8. And we had just gathered in the conference room when my secretary, Virginia Fisher, came in. That was long enough ago that people still had secretaries. And she said, there's been a plane that's hit the World Trade Center, and we, kind of brushed it off, thinking that it was probably a small private plane or something, general aviation. And then she came back in about 3 or 4 minutes later and said, you really need to look at this. So we figured out how to turn on the TV tuner that was hooked up to the monitor in there. And my management staff, we all sat there and watched. And just immediately started thinking about, what are we going to do? What can we do? What should we be doing? And we didn't have a very good idea. But we started sending police officers out to large places where we thought a lot of people would be gathered. More than anything, just so people would see a police officer and maybe feel a little bit comforted. So we dashed out to the airport, to Gateway Mall, Federal Building, State Office Building, a few places like that. But it was quite the day. Just quite the day for those of us in public safety. Real similar thing happened the day of the Sandy Hook shooting. Had just left the meeting when that happened, and I happened to be immediately, I was right out in the parking lot and heard it on the first reports coming in on network news on the radio, and gathered up the management staff at the police department and the fire department, and we started doing the same thing. So essentially, when you're in the public safety business and something like that happens, you try to localize it and think about what you need to be doing or could be doing locally. And like everyone, a lot of your reaction is you really don't know what to do or what might be useful to do, so you make your best judgment. In that case, we started sending police officers to some of our schools, as many as we could rustle together. And I know Steve Joel, I don't know if Dr. Joel's here, but I think you were pretty appreciative to have that little extra police presence for a day or two there to kind of help parents feel a little bit, maybe a little safer. And a lot of what we do in our field is about making people feel safe. It's not just the actual risk, it's also about making people feel like they're safe. So there you have it. That was 9/11 and the day after Sandy Hook. But what I really wanted to talk about today was something entirely different, not even in my area of expertise. It's always good when you're in front of a group like this to talk about something you know nothing about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about corrections, and I forewarned the news media about this. That's probably why we have so many reporters here, because I told them last week that I was going to be talking about this topic, and in the meantime, it's sprung up into to the local news quite a bit more. And what I wanted to talk about is a little bit of my concerns about what's going on in the field of corrections. What prompted this is we've had 4 high-profile incidents within the past year that have involved Nebraska Department of Correctional Services inmates that were either on some kind of conditional release like furlough, work release, parole, or in the most recent case in Omaha, a recently released inmate. And the first one was about a year ago on September 16th of last year. A man by the name of Jermaine Lucas was on furlough, 48-hour furlough in Omaha to visit family. And instead of visiting family, he acquired a pistol and went out to visit some of his gang rivals. And the Omaha police was called, a gunfight ensued, and he was shot and killed. And Mayor Suttle and Chief Schmaderer were pretty incensed that a guy with this incredibly violent record had been let out on a 48-hour furlough that the local authorities didn't even know about. So a few months later, on June 25th of this year, an inmate who was at the Community Corrections Center here in Lincoln, Jeremy Dobby, was sent on an errand. He's a trustee, so he's someone that's been trusted to be out and about, just like all those people that are taking care of the landscaping of the governor's mansion. And Jeremy was sent to pick up some other work release inmates who were downtown, and jumped in a state van. And at about 81 miles per hour, just a few minutes later, he collided with another vehicle at 19th and Van Dorn in a fatal traffic crash. And it was soon came to everyone's attention that Jeremy's record included driving on suspension a few times, conviction of DWI, conviction of reckless driving. He had a pretty extensive driving record. And I think a lot of people were pretty incensed that a guy with that kind of driving record was out driving a state van to transport other inmates. And then about a month ago, on August 16th, two brain surgeons, Lucas Turner and Gilbert McCabe, decided that Lucas is a inmate who's on work release. He's been sent out to look for a job. He's doing time for bank robbery. And McCabe, Gilbert, is a parolee for, I believe, second-degree murder. Don't quote me on that. It might be manslaughter. I'd want to look it up again. And they thought they might be able to blend in and Beatrice, so they went down there and committed a bank robbery. They did not blend in very well and were quickly captured by several thousand Gage County deputies, Nebraska State Troopers, Game and Parks Commission officers, and school crossing guards who all converged on Highway 77 northbound. Because if you're a law enforcement officer in Gage County and a violent crime happens, you assume that it must be some ne'er-do-well from Lincoln. Just like here in Lincoln, when it happens, we would be out on Interstate 80 and Highway 6, assuming that it must be some ne'er-do-well from Omaha. And of course, sometimes you're right about that and sometimes you're not. But that was a pretty high-profile incident. And then most recently, Nico Jenkins in Omaha. Nico Jenkins is a man who was recently released. He was released on July 30th from custody. He was serving an 18 to 21 year sentence. It was for 2 counts of robbery, 1 count of second-degree assault. That's a real serious assault. That's right below murder. 1 count of third-degree assault on a police officer, and a count of use of a weapon in commission of a felony. So he's doing some hard time on some hard crimes. And he gets out on July 30th, and just a couple of weeks ago, I think maybe it was September 6th, the Douglas County Attorney files 4 murder charges. So Nico is a suspect in the murder of 4 people and has quite the criminal record. So all of these have jumped up onto the front page in the Beatrice Sun and the Lincoln Journal-Star and the Omaha World-Herald. Our mayors and police chiefs in Omaha have been talking about this a little bit. Just an awful lot of questions raised by it. And that's what I thought I might tell you a little bit about. This is occurring against the backdrop of a move that's underway nationwide to reduce prison populations. And it's a nationwide movement. Get back to your office this afternoon, have a little bit of time. Google Right on Crime, which is a conservative, it's a website that purports to be conservatives who support reducing prison expenses by reducing the number of people that are in prisons. We have public officials here in Nebraska who are talking about this. The Nebraska legislature the past couple of sessions has talked about it. It's been an issue that's been in our local press quite a bit, with a couple of our state senators who've on the Judiciary Committee who've been thinking about, advocating, talking about a couple of bills introduced about ways to reduce prison populations. And so it's rather unusual timing that these 4 high-profile events happen at a time where nationwide we're releasing more and more prisoners into community settings, and we're talking about doing even more of it in the future. And the reason for that is because prison is expensive. It costs a lot of money to keep someone in prison. It's a high-value resource. And as taxpayers, we seem to be less and less excited about paying that expense. So even in very conservative states like Texas, where you can't get elected to the weed control board without being tough on crime, we have a lot of move in Texas to reduce prison populations and release more and more people. Huge in California, pretty big here in Nebraska. We've got about 5,000 people here in Nebraska. We're at a little over 150% of our prison capacity. Something's got to be done, and we're not real inclined as Nebraskans to say, let's spend a few more million dollars rather, and build more prisons. So here in Nebraska too, we're talking about ways that we can get more people out of prison. And I think that it's in our best interest, as we do that, to come up with some really smart ways of releasing people from prison, either through alternative sentences or alternative correctional settings in the community. It's hard to argue with that proposition. I'm just a little bit concerned that we go about it in a smart way. Primarily because I'm about to live through sentencing reform and prison reform, and I've already lived through behavioral health reform and child welfare reform. And in both of those cases, as Nebraska over the past 20 years or so has gone down those paths, we've had some pretty significant missteps. In my estimation, what primarily has happened with behavioral health care reform and with child welfare reform is that we tried to back the state out, we tried to close down institutions, we didn't do quite as good of a job of making sure that we had good alternatives that would work in place. So we've had to retrace our steps in those areas. We've had some really high-profile failures. The Beatrice State Developmental Center would be a good idea, a good example of that, I suppose. So, you know, our track record on changing courses is not entirely sterling here in Nebraska, nor for that matter most anywhere else in the United States. And I'm worried as we hurtle down this road towards reducing prison populations that we might be creating some problems that we just haven't adequately prepared for. And these 4 cases are kind of the worst case scenario for that. So I think what we need to do is we need to be very certain that we have put into place good community corrections alternatives. And I'm a big believer in community corrections. I think we have people that we really need to get transitioned out into the community and do a better job with that. Virtually everyone out there in the big house is coming out. There are only a handful of people that are serving life sentences that we'll never see on the streets again. And it's to our benefit to make sure that when they come out, they've got what they need to have some chance of success. And but here's what they need. They need help with housing, employment, training, treatment in many cases, and supervision. And that's what I want to make sure that we've got in place. I want to make sure we've got good alternatives in place. And I don't think we have enough of those now with our current population that's out on community release. And if we're going to have more and more people on community release, we've got to make sure that we're beefing up the resources. In other words, we've got to make sure that we've got enough parole officers, enough probation officers, enough community corrections workers, enough intensive supervision probation workers. We've got to make sure that we've got halfway houses. We've got to make sure that we've got job training and job placement programs that are adequately available. We've got to make sure that if you're a 24-year-old who's just getting out of prison after serving a 2-year term for 4th offense drunk driving, and what you really need is aftercare and inpatient treatment, but you don't have the money to pay for it, that you can actually get into Centerpoint for the inpatient treatment that you need and not 6 months from now. And these are real problems that we have right now with the lack of availability of these services. I've seen it personally with a few people. I have a good friend whose son was that young man that went to prison for multiple drunk driving convictions and needed to be there, frankly. Needed to be someplace where he could just be separated from the conditions that led to his relapses. And boy, try finding yourself a job when you're an ex-con. Good luck. You know, tough thing to do, really tough thing to do. So it's really to our benefit to make sure that people coming out are transitioned out. I'm a big supporter of furlough programs that give inmates an increasing level of freedom. Big supporter of getting people out on parole. Like halfway houses, transitional housing, I think is really important for inmates that are being released. We need more of that. But what I'm worried about is that we'll just continue to put more and more people out there, and what the net effect will be is that the caseload of parole officers will simply increase because we won't add the resources that need to be added to ensure good supervision in the community. It's a lot of people. I made myself the notes on the back of a Post-it here right before I left. 761 registered sex offenders living in my jurisdiction here in the city of Lincoln. I've got 451 people on parole today. I've got 36 people that are on long-term furlough from the Department of Correctional Services. I've got 85 people that would be in jail except they're participants in drug court, so they're in intensive supervision probation. I've got an unknown number of people out on work release today. unknown number of people on short-term furlough. I have no idea what those numbers are. I know they're pretty big. And I didn't have the number for the exact number that are on probation in Lancaster County today, but our chief probation officer, last time I talked to him, said it usually hovers right under 2,500. So that's a lot of people, and the availability of services for these people that are under some form of correctional control is not what it needs to be in my estimation. So in part, I think we've got to cultivate that resource as we move forward with trying to get more and more people into community correction settings. And then there's something else we're going to have to do. We're just going to have to face up to the reality that these high-profile incidents like this that have popped into our public consciousness in the past year, to some extent, those are inevitable. They are going to happen. Nothing's perfect. In my business, we have a saying, stuff happens. Despite everyone's best effort, stuff happens. And it does. I was very interested. I think our Nebraska Department of Correctional Services does an excellent job with the resources we provide them. And I have a great deal of faith and confidence in their management. I know Bob Houston. We've known each other for a long time. I think he's a real pro. I think they follow best practices. I really think highly of the Department of Correctional Services here in Nebraska. And Bob was on vacation when Jeremy Dobby plowed into Joyce Meek's car a few blocks away from us here on Van Dorn Street. When he got back to Lincoln, they started contemplating what they needed to do to change their inmate driver program that's been around for decades. And Bob came to the conclusion there wasn't anything they could do. They just needed to stop doing it. They needed to reach into the pocket, spend more taxpayer money for transportation services. And the reason they did that, I know exactly what was going through Bob's mind when he looked at it. This is one of the best driving records we've got. So despite Jeremy Dobby's lengthy driving record, he was the least of the worst. And that's why they've canceled the program there. We do not have a lot of people sitting in prison that I see, at least, that are they're folks you'd want to have driving a state vehicle, you know, hauling other people around. We really don't. And one other thing I'd like to leave you with is I'd like you to, this talk will always center around nonviolent offenders. You know, anyone talking about this will say, well, we want to get more nonviolent offenders released. I think a lot of times nonviolent offender is a little bit misunderstood. You can look at a guy that's serving time right now for something like possession of methamphetamine with intent to deliver and think, well, that's a nonviolent offense. It's a drug offense, nonviolent. But I'm telling you that for a very large number of those types of inmates that are serving time right now for a nonviolent offense, if you looked at their criminal history, it's a cornucopia of violent and nonviolent offenses of all type and manner. You just don't go to prison, in my experience, you know, because you're caught with a quarter ounce of methamphetamine very often. Certainly not for a first offense. People that are in prison generally have really lengthy records, oftentimes a mix of violent and nonviolent offenses. And I think you can make a pretty good argument that, that someone that's in prison because they've been convicted for the 8th time of drunk driving, or someone who's in prison because they've been convicted for the 4th time of possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver, I don't really think of those as being nonviolent offenses. So what we really need to do, what we probably don't have a real good grip on as citizens, is what's the real, down at the individual level, record of people that are being released or considered for release. And that's a lot more than just what they're serving a sentence for right now at the current time. So just a little bit of food for thought. Back to Nico Jenkins. Nico Jenkins was not on parole. He was not on furlough. He wasn't on work release. He had done what we call jammed his time. That means he served his maximum sentence. And I rattled off that list of long violent felonies that he was serving 18 to 21 years on. Well, he went into prison to serve that sentence October 17th of 2003. And he was released on July 30th of 2013. So he served a little less than 10 years of that sentence. And what's been revealing in the past couple of days in the Omaha World Herald and Lincoln Journal-Star, some of the other news media outlets, I think people are finally figuring out what good time is. Ordinary people. I mean, those of us in the criminal justice system are well aware of it. But when you're sentenced to 18 years, what that really means is about 9. You serve half of your minimum, essentially. So in Nico Jenkins' case, sentenced 18 to 21, He was actually in prison for a little over 9 years, almost 10. So whenever you read about someone being sentenced to prison for 25 years, just divide that in half, and that's when they're going to be out if they jam their time. Now, if they get parole or early release, it'll be far less than that. You know, you can usually figure about a quarter, maybe a third of the actual sentence, and I think that's been a little bit of a revelation to some people. All of us that work in the criminal justice system, of course, are well aware of that, and we've dealt with that our whole lives, so we know what 10 years really means. It really means 2.5, maybe 3. So that's the situation with these efforts underway to release more and more prisoners. Let's just make sure we do a good job of it, make sure we're really getting the resources out there that are going to be needed for them to have a fighting chance at becoming lawful, productive citizens among us. Be happy to address any questions anyone has. This topic, other topics, anything else. I know a little bit about a lot, so. Well, I actually read a quote from Senator Brad Ashford where he said $77 a day to keep someone in prison, $7 a day to supervise them in the community. I don't know where he came up with that, so I'm not vouching for his dollar figures there. But it should obviously be a lot less expensive to provide someone with good supervision in the community than it is to provide them with 3 hots and a cot and, work on their teeth and their eyeglasses and their bypass surgery at public expense. So I can't imagine the price differential isn't huge. Sir?
Comment on the effect of the aging prison population, how that plays.
Yeah, a lot more old prisoners. I mean, there's just a huge increase in the number of people that are under correctional control these days compared to when my career started. Even in proportion to population, it's a huge increase in the percentage, and more and more people they're really aging. And one of the nice things about getting older is you're less likely to commit crime now, Bruce. You just don't get a lot of 58-year-olds like you that are out there committing crimes.
54.
Oh, just checking. So I think that's a place that we really ought to be looking at. Getting prisoners transitioned into the community, even if they are serving sentences for pretty high-grade crimes, because they're just not going to be likely to be reoffending in any serious way when you get to be our age. And here's a news flash: I'm a lot more expensive to maintain at my current age than I was 30 years ago. Right? All of us are. So I think that's an area where we would have fairly low risk exposure. Yes?
Appreciate what you said about the release about solving the problems. The other is trying to keep people.
Yeah. Well, I have lots of thoughts on that. I'm a big believer in primary prevention. I was having a long conversation right before I came here with Lynn Johnson, our Director of Parks and Recreation, about the kinds of things I think work with kids that are in basically in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade to help them become productive young adults. We were just having a long conversation about that. I was relating my personal story to him. I was talking about some of my experiences mentoring kids as a camp counselor when I was a young police officer, my involvement with teammates and my involvement with Project Kid, and how much I think those programs have put people one-to-one in connection with an adult mentor they're not only what works, they're the only thing that works. And I was telling him a couple stories. I'll just tell this. I got to tell it now. Had a young man call me a little less than 2 years ago. He wanted to know, he knew that I was an old cop, and he wanted to know if I could tell him anything about his dad. Holy cow, could I ever tell him about his dad? And his dad was, I don't know, maybe a 19, 20-year-old that I was chasing around when I was, a 21-year-old rookie. And it was unbelievable to me. I knew this young man that called me. I had met him before. Child abuse and neglect cases, calls for service over at Eldon Connie's house. And I could not believe how well he was doing and how resilient he had been now that he's in his mid-30s. And I wish I would have asked him, this is what I was telling Lynn Johnson, who were the people that made that difference? I know who mine were. So from biggest bang for the buck you can get, put a caring adult in front of a kid at risk on a regular basis. It needs to be about an hour a week for about 9-10 months of the school year, and you'll make a huge difference. And that's what coaching youth sports is about. That's what Big Brothers Big Sisters is about. That's what Teammates is about. And the more we can do that, the less likely it is that that we're going to have, you know, kids that grow up in circumstances where their life is almost predestined to lead them into trouble. Yes, ma'am. HETS, Housing, Employment, Training, Treatment, Supervision. Was my little acronym that I wrote down here so I could remember them all. Yeah, I was watching this young man that is a family friend get out of prison. That's where he had difficulty. He had, you know, the only choice he had was to live with his mom and dad, and employment options just real limited. And my opinion has changed about background checks and employment. And I think we've gone too far. I think the pendulum swung too far. I think we've made it too difficult for people with troubled past to get jobs. And I think that needs to swing back. Not everyone's going to, you know, be a teacher or a police officer or a paraeducator or, you know, a Boy Scout counselor. But, you know, I see some jobs that are clearly would be fine jobs for people that have troubled past to get a chance at that they're not getting a chance at because we, in my estimation, become a little bit overzealous about background checks. Wayne? Yeah. Yeah. And God bless you for hiring them. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope everybody heard that. I mean, Wayne is happy hiring people that are on work release and people that are ex-offenders. The restaurant industry nationwide is probably the industry that's the most willing to take a risk on people with troubled pasts. There are a lot of great success stories out there with people that got their chance at a job in the restaurant business and leverage that into a law-abiding life, and we just need more of that. We've got to make employment opportunities for people that aren't they're just going to get right back into the same pattern if they don't have the stability that comes with a paycheck and a place to live. So good work, keep it up. I can't believe your turnover rate's that high because the same employees have been serving me since time immemorial. They Yeah. Great thing about going into Laszlo's is you know what I'm going to order before I even get to the chair. Any other topics? Anything else anyone wants to discuss? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for a nice lunch.